when you're in it like every 20 minutes, like, because the whole time you're sitting there going, oh, here we go, oh, here we go, oh, there I am, oh, no. So you just kind of get used to it. And it's also easier when I don't have makeup on. I enjoy it more when I don't have like, you have like a kabuki mask
This is
on.
the difference between what you look like without makeup and what I look like without makeup, perhaps. But you don't watch it and think, oh, I should have done that better, I could have done that differently, can't we redo that, even though it's in theaters or about to be in theaters? No, you should think I did a great job, but I think I may be sharing my insecurities if I'm climbing down to get
What do you need? Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Sometimes, I mean, with this movie, we had so much time. We shot for 59 days. So this was, to be perfectly honest, like the first film that I did that I really had the time to explore it. Like other films that I had done, I mean, Trainwreck as well, we really got to explore every aspect of those scenes. We'd spend a whole day on one scene. But the things that I had done up until that point were all independent, so you get 1 or 2 takes. So I was used to, it's like playing like a really intense game of tennis where you're just constantly returning the ball, and then you do go home in those moments, and you're like, oh, when you have 2 takes, it's so hard to decide what to do. But when you have something where you have the time to really explore it, you can actually go home feeling satisfied. You're just like, I gave it every possible angle that I could.
So backing up, this is Washington, so I'm going to ask it like a press conference question.
Right.
Number one, had you read the book
Yeah.
before the script hit you? You're interrupting my question.
Oh, I just
Yeah,
wanted to be
like
done with it.
Washington,
Yeah, I read it. Next.
Had you read the book, which we know the answer to, what attracted you to doing the movie, and what did you do to prepare for it? And I may have a follow-up. This is Washington.
All right, thank you very much. What was the? Okay, yes, I read the book. Yeah, about a year before, and then what was the second question?
What did you think of the book?
Well, I loved it, obviously, but.
And so when the script came to you, or tell us the story of
Well,
how that came about.
What I found interesting about the script is it's always a tricky thing when you love a book so much, and Room was one that really moved me in a way that I hadn't experienced in a very long time, like since 4th grade, and I got to the end of Where the Red Fern Grows, which I'm sorry to tell you is really devastating if you haven't read it. And so I felt a connection to the story, but whenever you love something like that, it's hard to picture it in a movie. And I loved Ma so much, I was like, I only want to do this if it's, I'm absolutely the right person, and I don't even know if I am, because Ma is such an essence in the book. You hardly ever hear any descriptives about her, aside from the fact that she had her hair color. I think that's kind of it. And I just never wanted to be the disappointment. I never wanted to be the one who's like, oh, she's the one who's playing her? Oh, that's not what I wanted. So I wanted to explore it fully and make sure that I was the right one for it. But in fact, making this into a movie became an incredible way to explore Ma, who's not as deeply explored in the book, and to show all of the complications of her, show all of the different sides, because when it's told all through Jack's perspective, you get this sort of innocent view into it. And that's a great way of looking at it, but the camera is not so sneaky. The camera is much more revealing. It's harder to play the game of hide and seek in film, so it became a fun game for me to try and play.
And so what did you do to prepare? Because you were on MSNBC today.
Did you watch?
I did. They sent it to me.
I was so nervous. I had to wear
That's
like
ridiculous.
I had to wear an earpiece.
Uh-huh.
I was obsessed with it. I couldn't stop touching it, and I kept saying, I wasn't on there yet, but I just kept going, thank you, Melissa. Because that's what I've always wanted to do.
Only get one.
Thanks, Melissa. Coming up next.
The thing about MSNBC, it's less than an indie film. You get one take.
Oh, it was so stressful. It was so stressful. I came right after a story about a snake on the loose.
Nothing but viewers on those snakes
from the news.
So how did you prepare?
For MSNBC?
No,
okay. For the movie.
You knew what I was
asking. I broke it all down into little pieces. So I took the fact that she was trapped in this room and what that would do to a brain. It's much different. Like, we can kind of comprehend what it'd be like a week in, but 7 years in, it's very hard to understand like what kind of level of acceptance you get to. And so I was able to speak with a trauma specialist about that, along with the sexual abuse. And I spoke with a nutritionist about what would happen to the mind and to the body and to skin, hair, nails with poor nutrition, lack of vitamin D. not having a toothbrush, not having face wash, not having a toner, and like what that would do, and not just part of it being surface, and then psychologically, and then I spent I had to stay out of the sun. I went on a restricted diet, gained 15 pounds of muscle.
When you went on a restricted diet, what did you stop eating?
Carbs. Which I'll never do again.
We can talk about that later. Yeah.
It was not fun. 6 months, no carbs. Try it sometimes.
Was that the director asked you to do that, or you just felt
No,
like
I
that was
chose that.
important for elaborate?
Well, because she only has so few foods that are given to her, and most of them we figured would be cheap things that had a long shelf life. And she never knows when she's going to get groceries again. I mean, it doesn't like old Nick, you don't look at him and think, that's a real nice, dependable guy. Like, she doesn't know. So everything's sort of hoarded there. She has to ration everything out. Even like the peanut butter is like such a thin scrape on that piece of bread. And if they're running low, everything is going to go to Jack. She's not going to take it. So I imagine that she was getting rather sinewy, but at the same time, she was a runner. She was athletic. I imagine that she was someone that was outside. And her only form of protection is her own body. So I imagine that she had to be doing something to not be in a state of atrophy, and to be carrying a child through a pregnancy, and then also as a baby, and wrestling with him, and keeping him entertained. So I wanted to put on some muscle to sort of feel that strength.
Wow. And you've talked, it was before making this film, you talked about the kind of psychological toll, some of the difficult roles that you've played, in particular a teacher at a facility for kids with special needs and foster care and psychological needs. And you talked about the toll that took on you. And then you talked in the interview that I read about how you would need to put that behind you so you could continue to do these demanding roles and function. So what was this one like for you?
Well, I had a little more experience with this one, and so I was able to have more time to prepare and kind of create parameters for myself. And I also learned how to scuba dive, which became a really helpful tool for me to visualize this. So in scuba diving, if you can't just like strap on a tank and jump into the ocean, you have to like have a plan. And the deeper down you go into the ocean, the longer you have to give yourself to slowly rise to the surface, or else you like explode. So it was the same, I was able to use the same analogy with this, which is understand that as heavy as the scene was, as deep as I was going, I'd have to give myself a lot of forgiveness, a lot of patience, a lot of ease, and really communicate with the crew the whole time as to what it was that was going on. And then making sure that I had friends and family around all the time. I was super open about everything that I was doing, so that they all knew this crazy thing that I was doing, and could kind of keep pulling me back to myself.
I want to open this up for questions, and I have so many, but I have one more that I wanted to ask you, which is about your co-star, Jacob Tremblay, and because you were an actor about his age, right?
Yeah.
What was that like to work with somebody so young in a role that was not only draining for you, but it must have been draining for him?
Well, he never knew that anything difficult was going on. He only knows as much as Jack knows. And the way that he sees the world is that, everything's great. So the making of the movie was not hard. It was a joy. I have an incredible video of the first time we rehearsed rolling him up in rug. And I'm weeping. Lenny's weeping because we're realizing the ridiculous thing that we're about to do and how moving this whole sequence is. And Jacob was laughing. I mean, hysterically laughing. He thought it was the funniest, most ridiculous thing that a person could do.
He was playing a game.
Yeah, for him it was just like, why not? And all the stuff that's in the back of the truck, we watched that and we're all like going, oh no. That was like 2 days of stunt work. For an 8-year-old, that's a dream come true. He was like, I'm Tom Cruise now. Like, I'm gonna do an action movie. So
good, because I was a little worried about him.
I know that people do worry about him, but he loved every second of it. And it wasn't this like, downer set where we were all like, trying to keep it together. It was, we laughed a lot. We had a great time the whole time, and he really loves it. I mean, it's his hobby. It's what he likes to do.
Great. Well, I feel like I could monopolize you, but I'm going to share you with the audience and my friend up there, Karen.
Sorry to jump in. The novel was inspired by a real life situation in Austria, and I assume right before you were filming, there were the 3 women in Cleveland. Did you find yourself like obsessing on the real life situations like this, or did you feel like you need to sort of divorce yourself from the news and the women that things like this had happened to?
Did everybody hear that?
Yeah. And Karen Tumulty is a reporter at the Washington Post, so she's asking
Hello.
really good reporter questions.
It was a combination of both, because I felt that I could not turn away from those girls, and in fact, them, along with every possible story that I read or could get my hands on about sexual abuse, became the fuel for my every single day. It was a very hard emotional shoot to do, and so I kind of created this weird scrapbook of newspaper clippings and things that I had found online and photographs of girls that inspired me to tell this story authentically. But what was important to me about the actual core of this movie is that story is an allegory for a universal feeling that connects us to it in a way that we don't realize maybe going into it. That it's not so much about going like, wow, look at this crazy thing that happened that's so rare. It takes it away from that and brings us into something that is a metaphor that we can so relate to. I mean, this is an old story that goes back to, there's Plato's cave, there's Greek mythology, there's the story of Bluebeard, there's Rapunzel, I mean, you name it, and every possible fairy tale of every origin, we have this story, and it's one of growing up, breaking free, and taking a huge step outside of the womb, outside of what feels like a comfortable place, but is the thing that's holding us back. And we've all had that moment where the time comes when we have to take that step, and it seems like I must be too young for this. I need another day, but the time's happening now. And how do we face that? How do we keep going after that? And what's there for us after that?
Somebody else?
Yes, right there.
Yes, because the movie is so intense and you shot for 59 days, how often were you able to shed that character and go back into yourself?
Well, hopefully at the end of every day. And in between scenes, too. I mean, it depends. If you're shooting something that's sort of intense, you kind of stay in it. And maybe, like something like the escape sequence, although it looks like it's one take, you end up doing that scene for 4 hours. So you get in this weird trance-like state that time becomes kind of warped in a way, because you're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, but it feels sort of different every time, and you lose track of that time. But the part of me accepting this role was being very clear with my boundaries and knowing what was her and what was me, and coming home at the end of the day and having very specific things that I knew were me. And I even at times got to the point where I would put a piece of paper and I'd draw a line in half and draw my name at the top and Ma, and then I would list all the things that were me and all the things that were Ma. So I could very clearly go, okay, that feeling of helplessness, that's Ma, that's not me, and here's all the reasons why I know. The feeling of loneliness, that's not me, I know that because these are all my friends that I could call at this moment. So you have to constantly sort of work with yourself, because the brain is so willing to please. And when you spend 7 months filling your brain, I would change the neurological patterns in my brain when I start to play these characters. And imagine playing a character for 12 hours a day. It gets sticky. You start to forget who you are. So it becomes a real dedicated process to not just put everything towards this character, but to make sure you leave something for yourself.
I want to ask.
Yeah, somebody else?
Here.
How claustrophobic was the room set in relation to the size it was supposed to be? Because it seemed to really capture the sort of tightness of it, but in reality, what was the set like? Sort of how did you prepare for that sort of sense of claustrophobia that was really pretty much the first act of the movie?
Well, in the book, room is 11 feet by 11 feet, and we made room 11 feet by 15 feet to accommodate a crew. of sometimes like 6 to 8, and it still felt really, really, really small. You're constantly in the way. Someone's elbowing you, you know, someone's stepping on your foot. You just are always feel like you're in the shot. And we shot pretty much in chronological order, so the entire time, as we're getting closer and closer through these 3 weeks of getting to the escape sequence, the crew was just like, get us out of here, you know, Brie, take us home, like get us out into the world. And we could really feel that momentum, especially for the week leading up to it, of people just wanting to get out. And the funny thing was, once we got out, we went out straight into a blizzard in the dead of winter in Toronto, and you're shooting outside and you're doing night shoots, and the day starts at 5 a.m. instead of in our cozy little soundstage where we could start at noon or we could start whenever we wanted and the sun never changed. And
You want to go back to room.
exactly, within 2 weeks the crew was like, kind of want to go back to room, which is what we had hoped, that there was maybe a flash of that as you watched the movie. That as you start to see how complicated the world is, there is this part of you that maybe you don't really hate, that you don't really like, that just says like, I kind of wish they were back in that safe place.
So I see some hands up in the cheap seats.
I'm like a little This Q&A side is super dark, so I want to ask a really lighthearted question.
Sure.
Working with an 8-year-old sounds really fun. So do you have awesome kid jokes? Are kids into weird stuff?
Let's see. I mean, I have a ton of stories about Jacob because he's hilarious. I think one of my favorites is in regards to him seeing the movie for the first time. And all of us were sort of like nervous because he didn't really know what the whole movie was either. And so he sat through the whole 2 hours, which I was very impressed by. And afterwards, his mom was like, "So Jacob, what did you think of the movie?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's good, but it's no Avengers." It's fair. It was very, very fair.
Actually, I'm originally from India, and it's a dream for me, to see a Hollywood star for the first time.
Well, I'm here. What do you know?
And actually, I'm a freelance writer, and I write a blog, and I'm an author. So I would like to know, like, there is a buzz that this movie could go into, like, Oscars, So I'm very excited, What are your thoughts about it? There is a buzz.
Whoa, we went on a journey with that. Okay. I have no thoughts about it, to be honest. It seems very nice, but that's all I know.
I'll pray for it.
Thank you.
This is a beautiful movie, It
Thanks.
touched my heart.
I think what's great about it is it makes people more aware of the movie and then go see it. And that's what matters. What matters is like, if you felt anything tonight, that existed and that's real and that will get to kind of go out into the world and more people will get to have that same experience. But you never know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there was another question up
It
there.
was nice to meet you.
And the equally expensive seats.
Yes, I'm wondering that when it's our turn to be supportive of someone who's just coming out of incarceration or abuse, you've been playing the other role. What feels supportive and helpful?
Listening. Silence and listening. I know a small piece of it, but I know a lot, as much as I could learn in that 7 months of time about the way that the brain rewires itself, and it gets sort of kinked up. And the hardest part about it is I don't think anybody can untangle it except for that person. And the only thing you can do is just like love the shit out of them and be patient and listen. Because nobody likes to get advice, and you especially don't want to get advice when you're trying to deal with something that's bigger than your consciousness can handle. But I'm also not a doctor.
And that listening really is what made Leo such an effective character,
Oh, isn't he
right?
the
And
best?
such an effective friend, really, for
Absolutely,
Jack,
yeah.
because he was able to stand back and be quiet.
He's so
Let it
quiet
come
through
to him.
most of the movie, and then it's one of my favorite scenes of the movie is when he's like, "I wish I had a friend that I could play with." Love that.
I'm curious, what were you thinking of of, or what's going on with the backstory of the father, the separated or divorced father?
The Bill
Very
Macy.
tense moment there.
What was the last thing you said?
A very tense moment,
Sure.
but kind of an open question.
Okay. Well, what I imagined before she was kidnapped was that her parents were still together and that they were sort of these two pillars for her, that they were a very functional family. And I think perhaps the fact that her parents were together were a bit of a point of pride for her, something that she really admired about them. So when she comes home and one of the first things she learns is that her parents are divorced, and I believe that a huge piece of that was over the grieving process of the mother not letting go and keeping the bedroom the same, and the father saying, we have to continue on with life. And that rift was the thing that drove them apart. And he moved to, I think, like Florida and kind of started his own thing. And in regards to his reaction when I come home, or Ma comes home, it's not an uncommon reaction because Jack, he represents physical abuse, and to a father, that becomes an incredibly painful reminder that's always there. And the thing that becomes really difficult is when that child that is born from sexual abuse grows up, he sort of resembles somebody that nobody wants to remember anymore. And so it can create a sense of tension that can be very difficult for people to get over. And so I think that that's kind of what that moment encompasses, is this boy becomes this elephant in the room and this constant reminder that there's this dark past that can never be let go of. It can only be brought closer to and loved and nurtured.
Tell us a little bit about what's next for you.
I'm prepping for King Kong.
Seriously?
Seriously.
So I'm a little scared to ask what that might entail since we heard about what this would entail.
What about playing King Kong?
Thank you, I really do catch on to that. Are you playing Fay Ray?
Well, no,
What are you
I couldn't
doing?
possibly play Fay Ray. That character already existed. It's its own thing, so I can't really say anything about it except I'm in a much bigger space. I'm in a whole jungle.
Okay.
I have no place that I am. I have no home, just a jungle.
Is it fun?
I haven't started,
Is
but
it
so
gonna be
far,
fun?
it better be.
Well, does this one count as fun? Did you have fun making this movie?
Room?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
It looked like,
but don't you have fun doing things that are hard? Like, I don't know, I like working out at the gym, and sometimes it's like, it's hard, but it feels good. Like, you go home and you're like, yeah, I did that. You know, like, what's life without those moments of, like, pushing through something that's hard?
this one seemed, it was really good work and really hard. I'm gonna, is there one last question from the audience? You're gonna get the last question, sir.
When you're an actor and you're working on something, do you have any sense while you're making it, like, this is going to be a good movie, this is going to be a disaster?
No.
Like the Oscars, do you have any objective sense of quality of what's out of it?
No, you have no objective sense. And I think if you did, some people would just be like, and I quit, you know? Like, you would be like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's impossible to know because every single day you're trying to find it. Every day you're just going, oh, let's see what's here, let's see what's here, let's see what's here. And you get very focused on that, of just getting through each day. And then usually for me, when it hits about the halfway mark, that's when I get really nervous. And I'm like, it's too much, I can't go back and fix anything. And then you just spend every single day thinking, well, today I'll fix it. Whatever happened yesterday, I can fix it today. I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations I had. We would have dinner, me and Lenny, the director and the writer and the DP and the producers, we'd have these wonderful dinners every Sunday, and the whole time we'd be like, do we screw it up? Or will it be next week? Like, I don't know, it's bound to happen. You don't know, but I think it's that sort of rub of the unknown that keeps you still hungry for it and keeps you still working towards it. Because I think if you kind of go like, I know, then you kind of lose the mystery of the fun.
Well, great. Brie Larson, congratulations on a
Thank you.
terrific film. Thank you so much for doing this. It's really fun.